were silently sitting in the kitchen, avoiding each other's eyes. What I had said about love, was it really necessary? Yeah, it feels like you just kind of dropped it just to say it. Like, it didn't feel like you really put any consideration into that. Like, she was like, what's going on? It's like, I love you. And it's like, what? And like, anyway, let's go home. Like, you didn't follow up on that. You just kind of said it just for the sake of saying it and just kind of moved on with your day. It's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like you really put any weight behind it, you know? Like, come on. A confession, like, he called it a confession, but it was just like, he just kind of brushed it off like it was nothing. Like, he's like, hey, listen, yo, you come back to the house. I got something important to tell you. And then they get back to the house, like, listen, yo, Himitsu, I've been thinking long and hard about things, alright? I've been up all night. I can't sleep. And, I've come to the conclusion that, hey, listen, baby girl, I love you. Then, you're going to, obviously don't say it the way I did, but, like, put a little weight on it. Make it seem like you're actually saying something important, not just like, oh yeah, no, I definitely should have gone to school today, very important day. Otherwise, that I love you. Anyway, let's go home. And it's like, my guy, come on. I don't have a lot of faith in you, but I think you can do better than that. Some words can't be taken back. They really can't. You can't just be like, listen, I might have spoke a bit too soon, but like, no, it's, you done goofed. Like, I'm all for you confessing your love, but after, you've given it some thought. Like, with Kagome, he sat down, he had a real serious think about it. He's like, man, we've been living together like this, and I can't stop thinking her. She's always on my mind. I want to do nice things for her. You know what? I think I'm in love. Holy shit. Whereas with Himitsu, he's just kind of like, oh, hey, just so you know, love you. Anyway, let's go home. Like, damn, homie. Like, yeah, no, that sucked. Now, sure, Himitsu knew full well that I wasn't telling the truth. At least that my words meant something different from what she wanted. But let that be a noble lie. It's not a noble lie. That's a very unnoble lie. That's what? Let it be a noble lie. There's nothing noble about lying about love, especially when you know that Himitsu has feelings for you. That's just so fucked up. There's nothing noble about that. Nothing at all. What the fuck, dude? I was about to tell her the truth here now. The truth that she had to know. The truth that was currently more important. Alright, so I took a deep breath, stood up from the chair, and walked from one end of the kitchen to another. Promise you won't interrupt. Himitsu showed no reaction to my words. So it started about a week ago. With Catherine's return, yes, but it's not only and not mainly about her. The same day, in the evening, I found a note at my door. It asked me to be careful, said I was in danger because of my parents' work. After these words, she livened up and gave me an uncomprehending look. Wait a second. I rushed to my room, took the note from the cabinet, returned to the kitchen, and gave it to Himitsu. See? It's not a joke.
Nika-kun.
Wait, don't interrupt. I was very agitated and wasn't looking at her. Instead, walking to the doors to the garden. But there's more. The next day I got a phone call in Russian and was told to be careful. Then I was followed in the city, I think. And finally, yesterday, I was interrogated by a Soviet agent. A KGB agent. KGB, understand? I paused. Himitsu didn't react, just kept looking at me. But in addition to surprise, her eyes also now expressed worry and pity. She said my parents didn't die by chance, that it wasn't an accident. They were killed.
But why?
She uttered in a strained voice. Because of their work for Kobayashi Corporation. For that damned company. She also warned that I'd be watched by, well, everyone who possibly can. I giggled nervously. Russians, Japanese, probably even Americans.
Americans?
Why not? They've got like constant beef with the USSR. Yeah. Although that was just my own speculation. Himitsu once again turned the note in her hand, studying it carefully.
Did they write it?
No. I don't know. That's probably enough truth for today. You only get a little bit of truth. You don't get the whole truth. Considering her and Catherine's relationship, it wasn't hard to imagine that if I said the note was from the latter, she'd go for a knife. The call was definitely made by someone from the KGB. That's what the agent said.
What do they want from you?
Nothing, as she said. They want to protect me from the Japanese, from Kobayashi Corporation. They said they think I have some kind of information. Data passed on by my father.
Do you?
Himitsu said seriously. No. If I did, I would have given it all to them right away and kept on living peacefully. A long silence followed. I was desperately waiting for Himitsu's reaction, but she wouldn't say anything, just sat there, her feet on the chair, her arms around her knees, her face hidden behind them. Say something, please. Suddenly she jumped off a chair, ran up to me, and embraced me firmly, pushing her whole body up against mine.
Nikolai, forgive me, please.
Himitsu was bawling. What did you do, Himitsu? Sunshine, what for? You didn't do anything wrong. No, she did. What'd you do?
No, I didn't know that something like this happened to you. I was acting so terribly. I was only thinking about myself.
No, not at all.
Nikolai, I'm sorry.
For a good while, we just stood there, wordless, drowning in each other's embrace. Finally, I took Himitsu by the shoulders and gently pushed her away. The most important thing you should know is that I don't want to involve you. It's just the KGB, the corporation, anything could happen.
I'll help you.
She said resolutely. No, absolutely not. I raised my voice. That KGB woman told me not to show any sign that I might know something. Told me to act normally. That's what we're going to do. Got it? Himitsu pursed her lips unhappily but conceded.
Fine. But I won't be able to sleep well at night anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that I'm in no danger, but she is right about one thing. The Japanese need something from me. They'll leave me alone when they realize I don't have it.
If you think so.
Himitsu smiled with some effort. She might have read more romance novels than mysteries, but I wasn't as naive. Unwanted witnesses got disposed of. When they realized I didn't have the information they needed, they would quickly figure out that I knew a lot of unwanted things about the corporation. Now I really need to get some sleep.
I'm not leaving.
She protested. Remember what I told you? Act normally. Don't arouse suspicion.
But Nikolai.
No buts! For a little while, Himitsu fidgeted in place.
Fine. But be careful.
Careful where? At home? What am I at risk of here? Burning myself with hot water or slipping in the bathroom? I grinned. Himitsu didn't react. She stepped close to me and said,
And also,
she rose up on her tiptoes, pulled me close, and gave me a firm kiss. I responded to it, but meekly, feigning surprise.
for luck.
We could all use some. Hell yeah. Himitsu left while I remained in the kitchen, deliriously staring at the note on the table. I could use some sleep. My exhaustion seemed to have passed that threshold where it unlocked a second wind. Where you're outwardly buoyant and full of vigor, but your mind can barely function. Yeah, I've been there. So I was simply staring into space, my mouth open, having forgotten where I was and what was happening. But the talk with Himitsu left behind a pressing feeling of understatement and uncertainty. Was I really, like a cow in a butchery, going to wait and see what fate awaited me? And if only it was me alone. But who could help me now? Who knew about my parents' work? Ichinose-san. The answer presented itself. The time for niceties had passed. If need be, I was ready to beat the information out of him. Jesus. Except nobody picked up the phone. I waited for at least a minute and received nothing but dial tones in response. Perhaps he wasn't home. I called again, and again. Finally, an agitated female voice came from the receiver. Ichinose household. Hello, I need to talk to your husband. My husband? The woman was clearly nervous. Who are you? I'm an acquaintance. He's not here. When will he be back? He hasn't been home for several days. Do you know where my husband is? She shouted. I quickly hung up the phone. So they got to him, too. Well, that was to be expected. My parents were killed. The Akira Shinji supposedly died from a heart attack. Ichinose hadn't come back home in several days. Was the corporation really getting rid of witnesses? In that case, maybe it was a good thing I didn't know anything. Anyone who actually did didn't seem to live long. What was the difference between a human and a resource for them? I wanted to sleep so badly that no strength remained to worry about anything else. With effort, I reached my room and fell onto the bed. I dreamed of having broken an arm. Instead of plaster, I was just given a splint that constantly threatened to slip off. It also turned out that the arm was fine. I had been brazenly tricked by the hospital. Then Kyosuke came and started to loudly laugh at me. And finally, the phone rang. I walked to it and answered and heard Ichinose-san's voice in the receiver. "Hello, Nikolai, is that you? What are you doing there?" But it wasn't the phone. It was the doorbell. Barely able to find my way around, I dragged myself out of bed and, still half asleep, went on to open the door. I found a young man wearing a uniform at my doorstep. "Are you Anarchy Nikolai?" "Well, yeah." He rummaged through a satchel and pulled out a small envelope. Tiny one, actually. I didn't know they made them that small. Sign here. He extended a clipboard to me with a piece of paper attached to it. Right here. He casually whipped out my scribble and smirked. Should I bring you the ink on through? The courier gave me a weird look, bowed deeply, and bid farewell. Have a good evening. In reality, I always used simple katakana for my signature, which did, of course, create some problems in the legal sense, but was generally acceptable for a foreigner. The realization of what had happened didn't come right away. I returned to my room and only then realized that I didn't usually receive letters, especially ones delivered by a courier. I hastily ripped the envelope open and took out a small folded piece of paper, a few sentences written on it. Nikolai, we need to talk urgently. Come to the waterfront after midnight to make sure you're not followed. We'll meet on the bridge. Ichinose. I don't believe it. I reread the note several times. What if it was a trap? No, it seemed too complicated for people with that kind of power. For instance, I was home alone right now, and always really. What stopped them from kidnapping or killing me? And then the note was delivered right after my call to Ichinose. At midnight. What was even the time? I looked at the clock. It showed a few minutes past 11. It wouldn't take more than an hour to reach the waterfront. I almost immediately decided that I would go to the meeting, simply trusting my instincts and logic. I just had to decide what to do about the surveillance. Ichinose didn't even have to warn me. Going out somewhere at almost midnight was definitely not normal for me. But if I were to do it carefully, for some reason I was confident that even if I was being watched, it wasn't the same way they'd watch James Bond or something. From the street, everything would look as if I had already gone to sleep. I turned off the light, sat down on the bed, and waited, holding my breath and listening in to the sounds coming from the street. Nothing. Or, well, nothing unusual. The first step is the hardest in situations like this. Then instincts take over. I took a few deep breaths, closed my eyes, and focused on my breathing. Time to go. The door silently opened and immediately closed while I ducked into the garden. I crept to the fence. A few of the planks weren't nailed well and were easy to move aside. A moment later, I was in the alley behind the house. Didn't even have any lampposts, being just a narrow passage between two plots of land. A couple minutes later, I was on my way to the station, trying to avoid my usual route. Only as I approached the station did I look back for the first time. My surveillance had noticed me, they'd followed me to the end. Giving them a reason to believe they'd been found wouldn't do me any good. If not, then all the better. But I had reason to believe that my plan had worked. At least at this stage. I boarded the train and looked out onto the platform. All I could see were tired Japanese on the way back home after a hard day of work. The Tokyo suburb welcomed me coldly with a chilly ocean breeze. I was in a shopping district near a port. It was already late, so most of the stores were closed. Why did Ichinose chose this place, I wondered. The bridge in question was visible in the darkness a couple hundred meters away from the station. I reached the place in a few minutes, but at first glance it appeared to be empty. Nikolai. I heard the familiar voice, and Ichinose-san appeared out of the shadows. Were you followed? No. Are you sure? He looked pretty calm, which seemed strange to me. Yes, absolutely. Good, good. I'm sorry, Nikolai, I'm sorry. What for? I asked with surprise. For my cowardice, for getting cold feet. See what's come out of it. He smiled sadly and immediately continued. As they say, first they came for the communists. What are you talking about? I thought that if I kept silent, they would leave me alone, but things turned out very differently. Ichinose let out a heavy sigh and lit up a cigarette. Thank God I was long prepared for it. I called your house. Your wife said you've been missing for several days. Yes, that's true. Our phone is wiretapped and I'm in hiding. My wife informed me that someone had called and I sent a courier with the note. But how'd you know it was me? Caller display. Heard of it? No, to be honest. Didn't even know where to start asking questions. It had to happen, sooner or later. After we had been kicked out of the project, it was inevitable. The project? The project is what your father and I worked on at Kobayashi Corporation. What is this then? He raised his tired eyes to me. I can't explain it in brief, and you wouldn't understand. I'll do my best. After all, my parents died because of this project. I responded confidently. I'd be glad to tell you, but it's not that simple. Each one of us was responsible for our own part of the research and development. I was a physicist and mostly worked on the theoretical calculations. They can have a lot of applications. What about my father? He was a rocket engineer. Is that so? I drawled. Here I'd always thought he built bridges. And the main problem is that we knew as little about the work of other departments as was possible. It was their way of preserving secrecy. I only talked to your father about work-related matters, and only when it was absolutely necessary. What kind of work-related matters? You wouldn't understand. He sighed. Ichinose-san, I'm neck-deep in this shit, and I want to get out. I'm not about to back down now. You don't know what you're talking about, Nikolai. Even if I could tell you more, it would greatly endanger you and everyone you hold dear. Everyone you hold dear. Himitsu's tearful face immediately came to mind. Look at me! Ichinose grinned. I've been long ready that someone would come for me, so I ran at the first sign of danger. Are you ready to do the same? No. I don't know. He was definitely right about something. Until I figured out what the difference was between a resource and a human. My father's work wasn't the only question on my agenda tonight. Do you know someone with the surname Winters? An American? Ichinose thought for a moment. Who is that? How are you connected? Do you know her or not? I've heard the name Winters. I thought it belonged to an adult woman. Now is she connected to your project? I don't think she has any direct connection to the scientific part of the project, but she could be representing the American side. American? What American side, Ichinose-san? Terrible guess struck me. Did you think it was only the Japanese working on the project? I didn't think anything, I responded rudely. And does this Mrs. Winters have any connection to the death of my parents? He frowned and looked at me carefully over his glasses. You were talking as if they were killed. Weren't they? Nikolai, He cut himself off mid-sentence, let out a heavy sigh, and lowered his eyes. I have no proof, but I suspected that the accident wasn't a coincidence. I couldn't tell you since it was just a guess of mine. That doesn't matter anymore, Ichinose-san. What about Mrs. Winters? I don't think so. No. But you aren't sure. Nikolai, why are you so interested in this woman? I'm telling you, I've never even seen her, just heard the name. It's a very personal matter. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. So Catherine's mother was somehow involved in all this. But she wasn't to blame for my parents' death. That is, if I were to believe Ichinose, who didn't really know much himself. But how is all this connected to Catherine's note? Did that mean she knew something too? My entire life was a lie and a theater of the absurd. My family matters were known best to everyone but myself. Ichinose-san, everything is not that... I need time to digest it all. I understand. And by the way, he sighed and turned away, clearly bracing himself. I haven't told you everything about Akira Shinji. He's not dead. I looked at him with a silent question on my face. At the time, it seemed to me like I was doing the right thing by not telling you the entire truth. Not to mention your phone is wiretapped, the same as mine. He was taken by people from the corporation. So in a sense, he may as well be dead. And this Akira Shinji, who was he? Oh, now he was a big deal in the project, and most likely knew much more than I. Then we need to find him. That won't work. It's Kobayashi Corporation, remember? He could be anywhere. Ichinose paused, then continued in a lower voice. He may very well not be alive anymore. But then what should we do next? We? He gave me a somehow fatherly look and said, I plan to keep hiding from the corporation. And you better keep far away from it all. Better yet, return to the Union if you can. I can't. I can't abandon Himitsu. Until I was sure that she wasn't involved in any of this. That she wasn't in danger. In that case, I can only remind you to be as careful as possible. I've heard that a little too often recently. Perhaps the corporation will leave you alone when they realize you have nothing to offer. After all, you have no direct connection to the project. Ichinose-san, thank you very much. No need to thank me. I did what was right. Will we meet again? He looked annoyed, but only for a moment. Here. He handed me a small piece of paper with a telephone number written on it. Memorize, and throw away or burn the paper. Anything so long as you don't keep it. It is the phone number of my nephew. You'll need to ask if Agawa-san is home. You'll be told that you've got the wrong number, and I'll find a way to get in contact with you. Ichinose-san, whatever happens, thank you very much. I bowed deeply. Alright, enough now. He grinned. Be careful on your way home. And then he disappeared into the gloom of the Tokyo waterfront. Jeez. Next train home would only come early in the morning, so I found a phone booth and called a taxi. The car was making its way through the streets of the sleeping metropolis at a steady pace, and I was trying to digest everything Ichinose had told me. But the volume of information, the agitation, the lack of sleep made my brain incapable of anything but recalling separate phrases from our conversation over and over again. Each one was important in and of itself, but made no sense when put together with the others. I got out of the taxi several blocks away from my house and returned the same way, through the alleyway and the hole in the fence. I desperately needed to sleep. Those few hours in the afternoon hadn't helped at all, and I felt totally beat. The house was dark and quiet, and so was the street. This time of night is the most serene and most mysterious at the same time. My inflamed imagination started to project jumping shadows into the corners and rustling noises into the kitchen. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will be better, I muttered, my head hidden under the blanket. Okay. I like how there's just like slight variations of different scenes. I like that. It's like you'll still meet with Ichinose on that bridge, but if you're going down this certain route, it turns out like this. If you go down this certain route, it turns out like this. I like that.
Nika-ken.
Someone was calling me, sounding as if from another world.
Nika-ken.
The voice grew louder, more confident.
Nika-ken. You need to get up. You said you should.
Zed? What did I say?
Nika-ken.
I strained and managed to open my eyes, only to see Himitsu sitting on my bed. What's the time?
I didn't have to knock you to school in time.
She looked to be in a sullen mood and wasn't even trying to hide it. I felt a bit better than yesterday, even though I had just woken up. Good morning. Still, I found it really hard to stand up from my bed. Himitsu remained seated, her head down. Yesterday I decided to stop lying to her, at least when it came to important things. Last night's talk with Ichinose had posed even more questions. Even if I hadn't found out about this project and the Kobayashi Corporation's dark dealings, I would have still been in danger. But the involvement of Catherine's mother radically altered the situation. Perhaps Kachi herself was in on it.
Do you want breakfast?
Himitsu asked. Yes, thank you. Naturally, some awkwardness and even tension remained between us after yesterday. Himitsu was cooking up something in the kitchen while I was showering, pouring as much cold water over myself as possible. Ichinose-san had said that it'd make the most sense for me to return to the USSR. After all, I still had some relatives there, even if I hadn't spoken to them in a long while. But if the KGB had found me in Japan, they would absolutely be able to reach me in the Union. Plus, I couldn't simply abandon everything here. But would living in fear and endless anticipation of calamity be any better? For the first time ever, I had a clear realization that there was someone to blame for my parents' death. Some very specific people with names and surnames, positions and bank accounts, maybe even families and children of their own. I can no longer think that it was just an unfortunate accident. No. It had been meticulously planned, and those responsible had to suffer retribution. Except I wasn't sure I could deliver it alone.